Welcome to our deep dive into Angkor Thom.
The last great capital of the Khmer Empire.
Right, and we've got a really fascinating mix of sources today.
Oh, yeah.
From like Wikipedia and smart history articles to travel blogs. And we even took a peek at what's popping up on Amazon when you search for like Angkor history.
It's amazing how much information is out there.
Yeah, you might even recognize some of these sources yourself.
I know, it can be a bit overwhelming with such a vast city like Angkor Thom.
Exactly.
Just to know where to even begin.
And that's where we come in.
Okay.
Today we're going to focus on a specific question. What were the societal structures that shaped Angkor Thom?
Okay.
We're going to go beyond those temples and explore how people lived, who held power, and what clues are left behind for us to decode.
It's like piecing together a giant puzzle. It's like these little fragments, inscriptions, sculptures, architectural remains, trying to reconstruct not just the physical city, but the very fabric of life within those walls.
So let's start with the man who envisioned this city. King Jayavarman VII.
Yes.
He built Angkor Thom in the late 12th century. And our sources paint him as a powerful and ambitious ruler.
Definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
He came to power after driving out the Cham invaders who had seized Angkor. So establishing a strong and secure capital was a top priority.
Of course.
But what's really fascinating about Jayavarman VII is that he was a devout Buddhist, which was unusual for Khmer kings at the time.
That really sets him apart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most Khmer kings before him were
primarily Hindu.
Right, but Jayavarman VII seems to have embraced Buddhism wholeheartedly.
Absolutely, and this shift in religious focus is reflected not just in the temples he built, but also in his broader vision for Angkor Thom as a city. He didn't just want to create a powerful city. He wanted to create a city that reflected Buddhist ideals.
We've seen those incredible seated sculptures of him.
Yes.
The ones with the serene expression and the downcast eyes.
Yeah.
Are those meant to play into his Buddhist image?
Absolutely. They're very deliberately modeled after images of the Buddha. He wanted to be seen as a Buddha of his era. A benevolent and compassionate ruler. There's even an inscription, the Yehom inscription, that compares him to the Buddha himself.
He clearly wanted to leave a legacy. And he certainly did that.
He did.
With his ambitious building projects.
Yes.
And we're not just talking temples here, are we?
No, we're not.
He built hospitals, rest houses, roads throughout the kingdom.
It was a massive undertaking.
It really was.
And this is where we start to see the intersection of his religious beliefs and his vision for Angkor Thom as a city. He saw himself as a protector of his people, both physically and spiritually. And his building projects reflect that ambition.
So how does this tie into the idea of Angkor Thom being laid out as a mandala?
Well, think about it. A square city enclosed by massive walls and a moat. In Buddhist and Hindu cosmology, a mandala often represents the universe, with the square symbolizing the continents and the moat representing the oceans.
Wow.
And as the very heart of this mandala, you have the Bayon Temple, Jayavarman VII's state temple.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
He wasn't just building a city, he was creating a symbolic representation of the cosmos.
It's like stepping into a sacred realm.
It is, and that sense of entering a sacred space is heightened even further by
those magnificent Naga bridges leading into the city.
Those bridges are incredible.
They are.
With their rows of stone figures seemingly engaged in this epic tug-of-war with a giant serpent.
Yes.
What was the thinking behind that imagery?
They're thought to represent the Hindu myth of the churning of the ocean of milk. In this myth, the gods and demons use a giant serpent, or naga, to churn the cosmic ocean, using Mount Meru as a pivot to release the elixir of life.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
A Hindu myth? But we just established that Jayavarman VII was a devout Buddhist.
I know.
What's going on here?
That's one of the fascinating things about Angkor Thom. We see this blending of Buddhist and Hindu ideas, suggesting a much more fluid religious landscape than we might imagine today.
So maybe he was trying to appeal to both Hindu and Buddhist subjects.
Perhaps.
Or perhaps this myth was simply part of a shared cultural heritage.
It's possible.
It really makes you wonder how these different belief systems coexisted and influenced each other.
It's a reminder that we can't always impose our modern understanding of religion onto the past.
Right.
The people of Angkor likely had their own unique ways of interpreting and blending these different belief systems.
Speaking of the people of Angkor, what do we know about the everyday folks who lived in this grand city?
Well, the wooden houses and palaces haven't survived, so we don't have those physical remains to study.
Okay.
But luckily, we have a fascinating account.
Oh, good.
From a Chinese diplomat, Zhu Deguan, who visited Angkor Thom in the late 13th century.
Zhu Deguan's account is a real treasure trove of information.
It is.
He didn't just describe the monuments.
Right.
He gave us glimpses into daily life.
He observed everything from the clothing people wore to the food they ate to the way they organized their society. And one of the things that stands out from his account is this sense of hierarchy with the king at the top, surrounded by a court of officials and a complex system of social classes.
So even though Jayavarman VII presented himself as this benevolent Buddha king, there was still a very clear power structure in place.
There was, and that hierarchy is reflected in everything.
Oh, well.
From the architecture to the rituals to the way people interacted with each other.
It's fascinating how these societal structures were woven into every aspect of life in Angkor Thom.
Like they were the invisible threads that held everything together.
They were. So where do we begin to look for those connections?
That's a good question.
What clues can we find in those inscriptions, sculptures, and architectural remains? And how can we use Zhu Deguan's observations to flesh out our understanding of how those societal structures shape the city's very fabric?
Right.
That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We've been talking about these societal structures in Angkor Thom and how they're reflected in everything from the city's layout to the king's self-representation as a Buddha of his era. But what about the nitty-gritty details of daily life? Where can we find clues about how these structures actually played out in the lives of everyday people?
Well, luckily, Zhu Deguan's account gives us some fascinating insights. Remember, he was a keen observer of everyday life, and he wasn't shy about sharing his impressions.
He talked about everything from the houses people lived in to the clothes they wore.
Exactly.
What struck you as particularly revealing about his descriptions?
One detail that jumps out is his observation about clothing. He noted that almost everyone, even the poorest citizens, wore a sampot. That rectangular cloth garment common throughout Southeast Asia. But he also described how the wealthy adorned themselves with gold jewelry and elaborate floral decorations.
So even in something as basic as clothing, we see that social hierarchy reflected.
Exactly. And it's not just about materials. Zhu Deguan also described the king's palace as being entirely overlaid with gold.
Can you imagine the visual impact of that?
A very clear statement of power and opulence.
It must have been dazzling. And that makes me think about those grand processions Zhu Deguan described with hundreds of palace women carrying candles, even in daylight. It seems like a lot of effort went into these public displays.
It wasn't just about aesthetics.
Okay.
These processions were carefully choreographed rituals designed to reinforce the king's authority.
So it's all about spectacle.
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
Remember, in a society deeply rooted in religious beliefs, these rituals also served to connect the king to the divine. They weren't just displays of power. They were expressions of a cosmic order.
That's a good point. It's easy to forget.
It is.
That for the people of Angkor, the king wasn't just a political leader. He was a sacred figure.
A link between the earthly realm and the divine.
Exactly. And that connection is crucial to understanding how societal structures functioned in Angkor Thom.
I agree.
The king was at the top of the hierarchy, but his authority was legitimized by religious beliefs. And reinforced by these elaborate rituals. So we have this top-down structure with the king and the elite at the apex. But what about everyone else? How did those societal structures impact the lives of the artisans, the merchants, the farmers who made up the bulk of the population?
Well, if we think about Angkor Thom as this vast, complex mandala, it's clear that it required a highly skilled and organized workforce to function.
It takes a lot more than just a king's vision to build a city like this.
It does.
You need the artisans who carved those intricate temple reliefs.
Right.
The architects and engineers who designed those massive structures.
Yeah.
The farmers who produced the food to sustain the population.
And you need the priests.
Right.
Who maintained those religious rituals and beliefs that were so central to Khmer society.
Right.
Don't forget, this was a city built on a foundation of faith.
It's like a giant intricate clock.
Yeah.
With each gear representing a different segment of society.
Yes.
All working together to keep time.
That's a great analogy.
And if we want to understand how Angkor Thom functioned,
yeah,
we need to look at how those gears mesh.
Right.
How those different societal roles interacted and contributed to the city's development.
Exactly.
So, for example, those massive stone temples weren't just built by snapping your fingers.
Yeah, I know, right?
It must have taken a huge amount of labor and resources.
It did.
To quarry those stones, transport them, and carve those incredible reliefs.
Absolutely. And that labor force needed to be fed,
right,
housed, and managed.
Right.
So we can imagine a whole network of support systems in place.
Right.
The farmers who cultivated the rice paddies, the fishermen who cast their nets in the Tamil Sap Lake, the merchants who brought goods from far-off lands.
It's amazing to think about the sheer scale of it all.
It is.
And it's a reminder that even though we tend to focus on the grand monuments and the king's vision, those achievements were only possible because of a complex web of societal structures.
Right.
And the collective efforts of thousands of people.
Thousands.
And speaking of collective efforts, our sources mention this intricate system of canals and reservoirs.
Oh, yes.
That crisscross the city. What role did water management play in shaping Angkor Thom's development?
That's a crucial aspect that often gets overlooked.
Yeah.
Controlling water, its distribution, its storage, its flow was essential for both agriculture and urban life.
So these canals weren't just about irrigation.
No.
They were about sustaining a large urban population and supporting those ambitious building projects.
Exactly. And managing a system like that requires a high degree of coordination and expertise.
Right.
It speaks to the Khmer's sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering.
Wow.
And their ability to organize labor on a massive scale.
It really ties back to those societal structures, doesn't it?
It does.
You need a hierarchical system with a strong central authority to manage a project of this magnitude.
You do, and it's this interplay between those top-down structures and the collective efforts of the people that made Angkor Thom possible.
Yeah.
But it also raises an intriguing question.
Okay.
Did the common people have any say in how the city was shaped? Did their needs and beliefs factor into the king's grand vision?
That's a great question. We've been talking about the king and the elite.
Right.
But what about the voices of those who built and lived in the city?
Right.
How do we find those whispers of history?
That's one of the biggest challenges for historians and archaeologists, trying to piece together those individual stories to understand the lives and experiences of the people who often leave behind few material traces.
It's like trying to hear a single voice in a vast chorus.
It is.
But even those faint echoes can be incredibly revealing.
They can. And sometimes even a seemingly insignificant detail can open a window into a whole world.
Oh, really?
Yeah, remember those roundels at Tai Prom? The ones that depict everyday animals.
Oh, right. Not the usual gods and demons.
Yeah.
But pigs, monkeys, buffalo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a glimpse into the daily life of the people who lived and worked around that temple. A reminder that this grand city was also a place where people raised families, went to market, worried about the harvest.
Right.
Just like people do today.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just about kings and monuments.
It is.
It's about the lives of ordinary people. Their hopes and dreams and struggles.
And it's those human stories that help us connect those societal structures to the city's physical development.
Right.
After all, those grand temples and palaces didn't just appear out of thin air.
They were built by human hands, sweat, and ingenuity, weren't they?
They were.
And that's something we'll explore in more depth in the next part of our deep dive. We've been uncovering this really intricate tapestry of Angkor Thom's societal structures, from the king's divine mandate to the everyday lives of those artisans and farmers. But it's so easy to just view these monuments as like
static.
Yeah, almost as if they materialized out of thin air.
Yeah, you forget about the sheer human effort involved in creating these colossal structures.
Yeah, imagine like the bustling work sites.
Right.
The coordinated labor of thousands.
Oh, yeah.
The symphony of sounds like hammers ringing, chisels chipping.
Just echoing through the jungle.
It's like a behind-the-scenes documentary.
It is.
Of like a massive ancient film set.
Yeah, and it wasn't just brute force either.
Right.
There was incredible skill and ingenuity involved.
Yeah. Think about the precision required to carve those intricate bas-reliefs.
Right.
Or the engineering knowledge needed to construct those towering temples.
It really speaks to the depth of knowledge and expertise within Angkor Thom's society.
And it wasn't just about building temples, was it?
No.
We talked about those extensive canal systems.
Yeah, those were a whole different set of skills and coordination.
Those hydraulic systems were crucial.
Oh, yeah.
To Angkor Thom's survival and prosperity. And managing them effectively required that hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
Skilled engineers and a workforce capable of carrying out those large-scale projects.
Absolutely.
It all circles back.
It does.
To those societal structures we've been discussing. It wasn't just these abstract concepts.
No.
They were the foundation.
The very foundation.
That allowed Angkor Thom to thrive.
And it's important to remember this wasn't a static system.
Right.
As the city grew and evolved, so did its social dynamics.
So we see new temples being built. Older ones modified or repurposed.
Right.
The city expanding outward.
Yeah.
Incorporating those earlier structures.
It's a reminder that Angkor Thom wasn't built in a day.
It wasn't.
It evolved over centuries.
Right. It was a living, breathing city that adapted to changing circumstances.
And that adaptability was rooted in its societal structures. It was their ability to organize labor. Yeah.
Manage resources, respond to new challenges.
Right.
That allowed Angkor Thom to flourish for so long.
So when we stand in awe of Angkor Thom today,
right,
we're not just admiring the work of a few kings or talented artisans.
Yeah.
We're witnessing the legacy of a complex and dynamic society.
We are.
A society that could mobilize resources, foster innovation, and create something truly extraordinary.
And it's not just about the grand monuments.
Right.
It's about the people who built those monuments, who lived and worshipped within those walls.
Right.
Whose stories are woven into every stone, every carving, every inscription.
It's like holding a piece of ancient pottery in your hand.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the warmth of the artisan's touch.
Yeah.
Sense the energy and creativity that went into its creation.
Absolutely.
It becomes more than just an object.
Right.
It becomes a connection to the past, a window into another world.
And that's the power of Angkor Thom.
It is.
It invites us to look beyond the surface, to imagine the lives of the people.
Right. Who created this magnificent city.
Right.
To marvel at their ingenuity and resilience.
It's a reminder that history is not just about dates and dynasties.
No, it's not.
It's about human stories. It's about the enduring power of creativity and innovation.
Right.
About our shared capacity to shape the world around us.
And as we continue to explore Angkor Thom,
right,
who knows what other secrets we'll uncover?
Yeah.
What other whispers of the past we'll hear?
The jungle still holds many mysteries.
It does.
And there are countless stories waiting to be told.
So many.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive.
It does.
Into the societal structures of Angkor Thom.
I hope you enjoyed it.
We hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to delve deeper into this fascinating world.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us.